In this video I'm going to show you some mistakes that students typically make in Year 10 before they become really good at writing. So here are some examples based on my current Year 10 class. They're doing some descriptive writing. And the first thing that I notice as a reader is they're using this phrase, there are, all the time. When you're describing things, there are such and such here and there are such and such there, and that's a really boring way of writing. Looking around the airport could be replaced by I notice, or alternatively you could get rid of that altogether and have something like this. Get rid of looking and I notice, so take the person out. Around the airport, small crowds of people huddled together like penguins in winter. And brevity, the idea to be able to do things quickly with fewer words, is always better. Around the airport, small crowds of people huddled together like penguins in the winter. Or you could have looking around the airport, I notice. But there are is redundant. We know there are because, well, you're going to tell us, and so those words aren't necessary. The second thing I'd like to tell you about is changing tense. Usually what happens is this. Most writers in Year 10 start in the present tense, but then they quickly leap to the past tense. So I'll show you how that works here. There are is happening now, it's in the present, but in the next paragraph, they were is in the past. And this is very, very clumsy writing. In fact, it's wrong. So my first bit of advice is just don't write in the present at all unless you're brilliant at writing, because this will always happen. You will always be tempted to suddenly jump into the past tense. However, if you got rid of there are, you would see that the past tense happens automatically with huddled. Around the airport, small crowds of people huddled together. That then becomes the past tense, doesn't it? And you don't have that problem. So that's yet another reason to get rid of there are. Okay, as you're developing as a writer, you start to realise that you can link sentences together with a semicolon. This is often a really good technique, not just to say, hey, I can use a semicolon, but to actually link sentences together for a reason. So let's have a look at this one. The lady next to them was glaring at them viciously. Her annoyance towards them was glowing on her face. And the semicolon acts as a because, and it kind of makes you relate backwards. So her annoyance towards them was glowing on her face because she was sat next to them glaring at them viciously. So that works really well. However, although this is a sentence, it makes sense on its own, and this is a sentence that makes sense on its own, you don't keep the capital. When you use the semicolon, you don't need that capital, you have to get rid of it. And that's a typical punctuation error that students make once they start to link sentences together using a semicolon. So no capital required. And now finally, two more problems. The first one is the verb sat. And so this is usually done as colloquial language, the language that you'd use in speech with your friends, but not in writing. So let me explain. Sat in my seat in the waiting area, I can see an old couple right in front of me. Now, the problem with the word sat is not that it's wrong, it's what it means, and I'll show you down here. The difference is I was sat and I was sitting. If I was sitting, it means I chose to sit there, and that's just where I happen to be sitting. But if I was sat, that means someone has sat me there. They've put me there. And it's possibly easiest for you to see with this example here. I was sat is like I was hit. It was done to me. If I want to be the person hitting, like I want to be the person sitting, then the phrase would be I was hitting. And so you can see, by having sat and sitting, you've completely changed the meaning. Someone's done it to you. and that's most obvious when you think of hit and hitting. It's very rare, but sometimes you will want to suggest that someone has put you there. For example, the air stewardesses, I think they're in an airport here, might have insisted that you sat there, in which case this would be correct, but I'm sure that's not what my writer meant. And then finally for this video, what I notice a lot in students' writing is the use of you, which you almost never need in description. So let me show you why. Sat in my seat in the waiting area, I can see an old couple right in front of me, talking and smiling to one another. Every so often, that follows, doesn't it? The I and the me. And the change to you is not just clumsy, it's wrong. So I could hear them chuckle and watch them trying to suppress their laughter, like two school kids laughing in a lesson. So, a lovely simile. But you're not in the description, therefore you could not hear. And avoid you altogether in your description, please. So to make use of this video, go back to some writing that you've done recently and see if you did indeed avoid these mistakes. And if you'd like further tips like these, they'll come pretty frequently if you subscribe.